We're going to talk about a bonus news story because we had this break about 10 minutes before we went live.
Uh-oh.
I have a feeling I know what you're going to think about this, so we're not going to dig too deep into it. But Deadline reports that a new Star Wars trilogy is in development from Simon Kinberg, guys. Which you love Simon Kinberg. He wrote the last X-Men movie, Dark Phoenix. You guys love Dark Phoenix, right?
Oh God, no.
Um,
Why?
you guys love Dark
Oh
Phoenix,
God, no.
but here I'm gonna
Oh,
I'm gonna
that's
get into
awful. That's just awful. Wow, they just don't know what they're
here
doing.
I'm
Okay.
gonna get into the story. So this is a really interesting one, right, Greg? So this is from Deadline, one of the more reputable sites in film reporting. Lucasfilm has closed the deal with Simon Kinberg to develop a trilogy of Star Wars films. Kinberg will write the trio and produce them with Lucasfilm chief Kathleen Kennedy. Now, here's where this gets really, really interesting. The person who writes this article, Mike Fleming Jr., he says, "I heard this will be this the sequel trilogy will be episodes 10, 11, and 12, continuing the saga that started in 1977." Um, but he goes on to say that insiders have disputed that report to him and have said that this is instead the beginning of a new saga, and it'll sit as its own like unique story of three movies in Star Wars. So that seems to be a point of contention. He says this is going to be episodes 10, 11, 12, but then other people are saying no, this is its own thing. This isn't 10, 11, and 12. So that we won't know probably for a little while. You had a reaction to Simon Kinberg. I want to go through his filmography. I'm just going to list off movies that he's credited as a writer on, and we'll just decide, what we think here. Okay. Mr. and Mrs. Smith. The original, like Brangelina, Mr. and Mrs. Smith. X-Men: The Last Stand, Jumper, Sherlock Holmes. Uh, let's see. Okay, hey, we got to give him credit on this one. Days of Future Past. That movie's awesome. Days of Future Past is awesome. He also wrote Fan Four Stick in 2015. Um, X-Men Apocalypse, Dark Phoenix, The Killer's Game, which I haven't heard of that. It came out this year. He also did a Netflix movie called The 355. Uh, yeah. So he's got a bit of a back and forth here. He produced the Deadpool movies, Logan he produced. So, bit hot and cold. Bit hot and cold here for Mr. Kinberg. But now he's going to be doing some Star Wars movies. And for what it's worth, they gave him a special thanks credit on The Force Awakens and Rogue One. So whatever the hell that meant. But yeah, he's gonna be writing some Star Wars movies, Greg. Buckle up, Buttercup.
That's wild. I mean, personally, like, I mean, just like I checked out of this franchise for a long time now. At this point, like the Mandalorian, sure, but that's the only thing we've watched. I keep my Star Wars at arm's length. I've kind of just fallen off of it to the point where like it doesn't matter to me anymore. But at the same time, as an
Oh,
outsider
doesn't
looking
matter.
at that fan base, I don't think it's a good idea. Like the fan base is so heavily divided on everything, and there's now subcategories
Also,
of fan base. I feel like it's a case where like nobody's going to be happy about whatever they do, no matter what they do, even if it's technically good. No one's happy. So it's just like I feel like they should drop Star Wars and just move on. Like I do, they just, but you know what I mean? Like they do a show, it's great. Then they do three other shows, and everyone hates them. It's very weird. It's a very weird looking at it from an outsider who used to be a fan of it and just kind of fell off. Just it's very weird to me. Like looking at this, and I think it's just dangerous ground. Like you're just no one's going to be happy ever. So like you said, it said about the
right.
Star Wars game, right? Like it wasn't a bad game, right? Maybe a little too much stealth, but like just the controversy surrounding it that didn't need to surround it because of it was just Star Wars, but it wasn't the right Star Wars. It was the other Star Wars, but that Star Wars is bad and this Star Wars is good. I'm so tired of that. It's just exhausting. It's just so
Mhm.
exhausting. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, we came the Last Jedi came out, it divided the fan base, good, bad, whatever, right? But like it's just so toxic at this point. I feel so actually no, volatile. It's just volatile. Not that it's bad, it's just volatile. It's very land filthy mind. Oh, you did this Star Wars thing right, but you do this thing right, and everyone freaks out, right? Like didn't like someone like
Mhm.
flip out over the acolyte because they had some character in there that wasn't with like the pre-canon lore, so like it made this huge wave through the fan base. It's so messy. I feel like why? Like just, if you want to do something like if you want to do a side adventure, right? Like with Skeleton Crew, you want to do something fun for the family, that's fine, right? I think that's pretty harmless. But the second you get
Right.
into a new trilogy with new characters, or you mention the Skywalkers, or you mentioned or go anywhere near the original trilogy, like just everything blows up. And it's just like, at the end of the day, it's a movie. people take the movies very seriously, and like I don't think it's a good idea. I think they should just let do the shows, let it teeter out, and then but it's an IP, right? So they're gonna be making movies for the next 20 years, and there's people who will just hate watch those movies over and over and over again. It's very odd to me as an outsider of
Mm.
the franchise. Very odd to me because arguably the original trilogy was like one of the first of its kind. It did a lot of new things with visual effects. It created this huge fan base, right? It did 3 movies that were 1977, 1984. So it took a little over 8 years to
I think Jedi was 83.
83. So 6 years, 3 movies. That's like really impressive, right? Like it's the first of its kind. Like now it's like Endgame came out, same thing, right? They did all these Marvel movies, connected them all. I don't know if Star Wars fandom specifically can survive another 3 sequels. You know what I mean? That's the weird thing, right? That's because you have people who like the original trilogy, you have people who like the prequels, you have people who like the new trilogy, you have people who like all 3, you have people who like 2, like people who like 1. Like it's so sensitive. Like you just you know what I mean? Like, and I feel like it's just gonna be criticized to hell, like don't do it. I'm the same way with Ghostbusters, but then again, we don't get like a lot of Ghostbusters stuff, so I'm lucky in that regard. We don't have like a trilogy every 10 years or whatever. So that
Right.
it's like that's I think it's a bad idea. I think it's a
Mhm.
terrible idea. I think it's just let it lie. Keep doing the shows. Just don't touch anything else. You're just going to anger everybody. It's just going to be weird. And like kids nowadays too, like say it's for a new audience, right? They're not going to have that perspective of the original trilogy, the prequel, or even the new movies. So like, who is it for? Who, you know what I mean? Like, are you just making, because if when you make a Star Wars, I'm gonna have my pet. If you make a Star Wars movie for fans, people hate it. If you make a Star Wars movie for yourself, people hate it. So I don't know what the winning formula is for this genre anymore. I don't know. I've talked enough, Donovan. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, I think what's important to keep in mind is that Disney did not spend $4 billion to acquire Lucasfilm to let Star Wars go and stop making Star Wars movies. That's never going to happen. Um, I think that it's inevitable that there's going to be more movies. Even if this isn't 10, 11, 12, they'll make those movies one day. It's too delicious of a prospect. I mean, The Force Awakens made 2.4 billion dollars across the
Oh,
world.
they made
These
their money
movies
back on the original
are too
trilogy
popular.
period, on the new trilogy period. They made all the money back they spent on it
Yeah,
easily. Yeah,
they made
not
it. They
including
made
the
it back
merchandising.
with
Yeah.
Force Awakens and Rogue One. Yeah, yeah. They made it before they were done with the trilogy, but they didn't plan to stop. They weren't like, let's make 4 billion and then we can call it quits. They weren't just trying to get money for the retirement fund. Um, so yeah, they're gonna keep going. I think that the franchise obviously left on a sour note. I mean, it's subjective. I know people who genuinely really like Episode 9, but I think the majority of people weren't the hugest fans of it. Even the people who were on board for the new era stuff, it definitely went out with a bit of a whimper. Just sequentially, looking at the hype it had in like 2015 and 16. So I like the idea of there being a new good Star Wars movie. That'd be awesome if there was one that came out that was great, that was a bit enjoyable than the last one. But it's interesting because I think the special thing about Star Wars is that you can kind of reinvent it for every generation. Because in the 2000s, in 2005, I had no connection to the original trilogy. I can tell you shit
Mhm.
about Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, but boy, was I like a kid in a candy shop watching Revenge of the Sith at the theater. I thought it was the coolest thing I had ever seen on a screen because that movie was just awesome. I didn't need to know anything about the original movies because the lightsabers looked cool, the battles were awesome, the effects looked awesome to me. The drama was crazy. It was epic, So I think you can do that without tying it into the new and old movies. It's one of the things I always gave Force Awakens credit for because on one hand, yes, that movie is like a nostalgia trip. You're getting all the classic OG characters, everyone's saying the line and doing the thing. But also, I took my brother to see that movie, who was 10 years old when it came out, and it was his favorite movie of all time. We walked out the theater. That dude didn't know shit about Star Wars, but it's just the new movie. It had enough original. It had those new characters in there that people were able to connect to and enjoy. And I think a new movie, if you can introduce new characters and deliver moments that are memorable, I mean, people are always going to be excited to watch lightsabers bang into each other and hear ships soaring through space
Yeah, I feel like the
and ripping
younger
each other up.
audience is always less critical of like stuff like that. It's when you get to the older, crotchety, you know,
Yeah.
demographic or older audience where they're like, well, they didn't do this right, and this and Claudia Stewart didn't have that hair in this episode, and like I think
Mhm.
that's where the problems start, because I think you said you introduce somebody like a child to it, or even someone who's just younger. It doesn't have to be a kid, but just someone who's younger. They're more open to the idea of different things, more accepting. They're not going to be constantly comparing it to Empire Strikes Back, or constantly comparing it to Revenge of the Sith, or constantly comparing it to whatever comic or book they read, right? And I think that's where it lies, right? They're counting on a new audience to be a little bit more lenient for it. But I'm going to take you on a time capsule, Donovan, because in 2005, I went to the premiere of Revenge of the Sith and I recorded my entire experience.
Okay.
You ready for the 2005 vibes? I should play some terrible 2005 music.
I'm ready.
This is at my hometown of Temecula, California, one of the widest rich cities in the fucking universe. And like this was
I know
just
you had this video.
yeah, we did like a documentary of it. Like we interviewed people and like asked them what they thought the movie would be like, and is pretty cool. Like this is the little time capsule, 2005. Yeah. So
Like, yeah, with
I
the
love
Anakin
it's like
the
so
clips and
dated.
stuff.
The hairstyles, the everything is
Mhm.
so dated.
Oh God, yeah. This is real 2005. Jesus. Wow.
And we talk about
What
like the
year was
different like moments of we just interviewed like 4 or 5 people online.
it? Mhm.
Like you can
Yeah.
tell how compressed it is. Yeah.
But I mean, this video, the existence of this video, Greg, is why they'll never let Star Wars go and stop making the movies, because there's just no other franchise that elicits this sort of like cultural response, right? You could argue that it's not as culturally relevant as it was in '05, but like there's no other series and film that's like getting people to act like this, right? Maybe Lord of the Rings, right? When they make new Lord of the Rings, people would do stuff like this. But in 2015, it was similar vibes, right? People were wearing cloaks and bringing lightsabers to the movie theater, and were shelling out cash to see that movie as soon as they humanly could. So as long as there's ever a chance to capture that cultural moment, they'll always try. I think that yeah, there is a very large demographic. I don't want to say large, but there's a significant demographic of the Star Wars audience that is crotchety and complains about everything and is always unhappy. And my argument would simply be that you should not make decisions based on what those people think, and you should ignore them and let them yell and scream into a microphone. Because one, they're going to see the movies anyway because they can't help themselves, and two, they're just not the kind of people that you should want to please anyway. I think that there's definitely a way to make a movie that people enjoy. Obviously, you will always have the cynical folks, but I think that just comes with being a franchise. Once you go from having one movie to two, you instantly lose a large chunk of the audience because there are people who just check out at the prospect of something being a series or a franchise or an IP, if you will. So that's just going to be the reality of it. But I don't think that it's just dead and gone. You can't do it right. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Is Simon Kinberg the guy to crack it? Who knows? We'll find out. I'm sure he
Probably
had some
we'll
killer.
see.
He had to have some sort of pitch that made Lucasfilm go, okay, yeah, we'll give you a whole trilogy. I mean, for what it's worth, one of the biggest missteps they had behind the scenes with the sequel trilogy was not having a plan for a full story, right? J.J. Abrams came in with an awesome opening chapter and was like, here's a great way to bring back Star Wars. But nobody had a plan of what the third movie would look like, or really even the second at that point. It was just like, hey, let's just give this an awesome setup and just see what happens from there. David Craddock in the chat says great video, Greg. Yeah, this is awesome. I know you had this.
I'll link it and I'll put it in the
But
chat. You want to watch the whole thing?
but
What a time capsule. Sorry,
yeah, it also
continue.
looks like really good for 2005. I just feel like I need to mention that. It looks decent, at least watching it on a live stream of you streaming it from your own computer. But yeah, so this time around, at least they have a person, a creative, who has laid out some sort of 3-movie plan or who will be there for all the installments. I mean, that's already something they didn't do with the last series of movies. Again, I don't know if Kimberg's the guy to do it. I don't know. Screenwriting's hard. Maybe he'll knock it out of the park, but it's inevitable. I mean, they're making new Star Wars movies no matter what anybody thought or did. So
I think it's interesting too, because as times have changed, like obviously writers grow up with different problem, like writers experience life, and that life is in their writing. So like a lot of the writers in like the 70s, 80s, even to the early 90s, like they were coming off Vietnam, maybe coming off people who actually knew they came back from World War II, and so like that inspires their writing. And this isn't me advocating or not advocating this, but like now, like the current political climate is like gender politics, right? There's a lot of gender politics in our current, and that you're seeing that in a lot of writing, because that's what those writers are experiencing. Like it's just writing mimics life, and the life experiences go into the writing. So that's why you're getting a lot of these diverse scripts, with a lot of LGBTQ characters, because this is what the current not necessarily trend, but this is what these writers are experiencing in their generation, and it shows in there. Whether you like it or not is subjective, but that's just the truth. Like, people who do life experiences pour it into their writing, and you see it as we evolve and grow as a society, as a culture, as human beings. And it'll never be as good as, the 84 Ghostbusters or the 77 Star Wars. You can never live up to that. So you just do your best and hope that it works out, right? Because you're never going to be that good. It's nostalgia, and rose-tinted glasses are a hell of a drug. You'll never be able to mimic that thing. But that's why, as adults, especially my generation, millennials, that's why you chase so much of this shit you see behind me. Like, you're trying to rekindle that magic that you had of watching Star Wars when you were 10 years old in front of the television or in a movie theater. But I mean, but it's just never going to happen, right? Like, and whether they're good or bad, subjective, whatever. I will say this though: if you don't like the current state of Star Wars, and I'm out of the race, my horse has been pulled, then don't pay to see it. Don't watch it on Netflix. Like, but that takes a level, I think, of self-control that a lot of people don't have, because fandom is fandom, right? You have to watch all of them, even if they're bad. But that's how Velma, that terrible Velma show, got a second season. People watched the hell out of it, and it got renewed for a second season. And they're like, whoops, okay, we're not supposed to watch it. Okay, we won't watch the second season. Then it gets canceled, right? So if you really don't like it, if you like it, great, support it, watch it on Netflix, buy a ticket, go with your friends, enjoy. If you don't like it, don't watch a ticket, don't stream it, and then they'll learn and adapt to that. Otherwise,
don't make it your identity that you don't like it.
Yeah,
that's just ignore it.
That's also a good point too. Like, don't feel personally attacked if someone doesn't like Han Solo. You know what I mean? Or Boba Fett. I know some people that just get so bad with, like, you're just like, Boba Fett sucks, and they're like, "What'd you say?" I've got a Boba Fett tattoo on my forehead.
Forehead. Man, I worked at a grocery store in high school, and there was this dude that came in. He was a tattoo artist. He was bald dude. And his body was covered almost every inch with either a Star Wars or a Marvel Comics tattoo. And it was like, I mean, he had like Luke Skywalker's face. He had Captain America's shield on his leg. He had like the freaking Ewoks on the side of his head. I mean, like every square inch of this dude's body was either a Star Wars or Marvel tattoo. And every time he came in, I used to be like, dude, that's freaking awesome. Because they all looked so good. But yeah, I just thought of that when you said the Boba Fett tattoo.
I mean, I got tattoos of IP on my body too. It's not like I'm saying don't do that, but no, yeah, it's interesting. I think it's Star Wars is an interesting franchise. Trends change, tastes change, and I just wonder if how long this, because there may be a day, I may not see it in my life, where like no one cares about Batman anymore. That may be there may be a day, like where like people are just over comic books characters in general, not just film or television or whatever. They're just done. Like, and that's just because trends change, people change, popularity changes, pop culture changes. Like, I can show you how many, like you and I kind of relate to this. In the 70s, like, Charlton Heston was a huge actor. Most kids don't know who that is today. Most kids have never seen the movie Earthquake, which is like the equivalent to like a the movie. There was a 70s movie called Earthquake. Have you ever seen that movie, Donovan? I'm just gonna pull it up.
What movie? You said it's called what? Earthquake?
Earthquake.
No.
See if I can find a trailer. So, like,
negative.
This is just a good example of like 74. Here we go.
Good year.
When they added, and I'll swap it. So, like, Earthquake was a movie in 1974, starring Charlton Heston, which by all means, Charlton Heston is a very talented actor. But like, to compare him today, he would be like Chris Pine, right? He is that actor in the 70s that's super popular. But the movie Earthquake, although it was like this huge production, had a huge star, fades in the distance. It's not because of the period, because of how it looks. It's very 70s, very dated, right? State-of-the-art practical effects, whatever for the time, huge cast, like miniatures on the screen, but it fades with time. No one's going to care about Earthquake the movie or Charlton Heston eventually. Just like, what's the other, Clark Gable? Like, no one, people don't know who Clark Gable is. What's Gone with the Wind? Like, it fades. Like, trends fade. And I feel like I always wonder how long that'll take to hit Star Wars, Ghostbusters, Marvel. You know what I mean? Like, how long before these trends fade and we're looking at a trailer, someone's looking at a trailer in their VR headset plugged into the Matrix going, wow, I can't believe people watched this in 2024. I know, I think about a lot of weird shit all the time. Yeah.
I think it's a fair point, but my argument would be that they may become less popular, but I think that they will always be relevant and known. Because although I don't know Earthquake, right? I mean, in high school, I took a film class, and in that class, we watched Doctor Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb. That movie came out in 1964.
Right.
My parents weren't even alive when that movie came out, and there I was at 16 years old, not only watching it, but like writing about it in a film class. In college, I wrote a 2-page essay about Casablanca, which came out in 1942. 1942, like during the Second World War, my grandmother wasn't even alive when that movie came out, and there I was watching it, and now I own Casablanca in 4K, Ultra HD. It's one of my favorite movies. So, I mean, sure, less people know about it. I mean, if I texted my friend group chat right now and be like, "You guys love Casablanca," they might be like, "What are you talking about?" But it still exists. It'll still be relevant. And sure, maybe in 80 years, people won't give a shit about new Star Wars movies, but there will be a class, where people are watching A New Hope or The Empire Strikes Back, and they'll still be talking about how big, those first early blockbuster movie plot twists were, or how Jaws and the original Star Wars created the American blockbuster the way that we know it.
Right.
I think they'll always be relevant and noteworthy. Sure, they may not be the most relevant things, but they'll always be around.
Now, the question I pose to you, though, is do you think 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, we're going to do film studies on Endgame?
Endgame,
or
maybe.
something like that? You know what I mean? Like, do you think we'll like look at it as like a cinematic piece of art, or do you think they'll just be like Earthquake? They make a lot of money, they come and they go. Because you don't watch Earthquake in your film class, right? This is like the equivalent of like a Dwayne Johnson movie. Action movie, lots of heavy visual effects, made probably billions of dollars in the box office with inflation, right? But what the hell is Earthquake? Who the hell is Charlton Heston? Like, do we need to watch this in a film class? Like, that's what do you think we'll get to that point eventually where you're watching stuff that's making very popular now into a film class?
I don't think that we'll look at Endgame as like, oh, look at the cinematic technique here and how this shot is used or whatever. But I think that people 50 years from now will talk about how Endgame was the culmination of 11 years of movies and how it was essentially the 21st sequel in a series that ran for a decade uninterrupted, of critically beloved movies that will probably never be replicated. I don't think any franchise will be able to pull that off again, and how it was the highest grossing movie ever made for a considerable amount of time and had every actor in Hollywood in it. I think the people will talk about that, yeah, because it was very culturally relevant, and it was one of the most significant movie events to happen. I would say the same about Barbie or other movies that have accomplished something.
Barbie,
like that.
Barbie and Oppenheimer are two films you'll definitely watch in film class 50 years from now, for sure, no doubt, like absolutely no doubt.
Yeah, I mean, I think in a lot of cases, the culture and conversation around a movie can be just as important as the movie itself. And I think
for sure, for sure, yeah.
Produced massive pop culture moments. So
that's one of the things I hated about end credit scenes, because for a long time you were leaving the theater not talking about the movie, just talking about the end credit scene and speculating what was next. And that was a really disappointing time for me, I think, in movies, when that became just the whole 2-hour movie came about the 30-second end credit sequence, and that was it. That was it.
But don't you love that it forced people to stick around and watch the credits for movies instead of bailing in the theater?
It did do that. And then they started putting them before the credits or during the credits. Did you notice that?
Yeah. Well, that's the thing too. Yeah, because sometimes you'll get like the mid-credit scene, then the end credit scene. Or one will start at the end of the movie, then they'll do another one.